Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. As you know, we would have been due to have a Monday night panel following the Forest Green game, but as that was postponed, we have been able to do an On the Sofa, which we are very grateful for Steve White to agreeing to do that for us. Just a couple of things. On next Monday, we have another On the Sofa, and we have John Gorman. But we've got a special on this Wednesday coming, the 30th. We have Rob Angus, Matt Walters, and James and Alex from the Trust, and hopefully Clem, depending on where he is in the world at that time and time differences and commitments. So that's on Wednesday at the usual time of 7 o'clock. That's just to we haven't had them on for a while, so just a general update on everything, answer your questions, but also with the ground sale as well. So they'll be on Wednesday. So as I say, we've got the very great pleasure of having Steve White on. So let's bring Vic on. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Chris. A very good evening to you. Hope you're well.
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much indeed. The sun has decided not to come out today. It's hidden behind the clouds. So summer seems to be over. That's the end of it.
Not as cold as yesterday, but that was a bit bitter up here yesterday. But yeah, after all the nice weather we've had, it's it's a shame. I have heard snow and ice being mentioned, but we'll just ignore that for the minute.
Yeah, we're looking forward to Rochdale away on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay, I'll bring Steve on. I will say Steve is having a bit of trouble with his audio, with his camera at the moment, so he will flit on and off for you. You will see him, and then he'll be a circle. So we will, but we can still hear him, which is a good thing. So here we go. Hi, Steve.
Hi there, Chris. How are you? Hi, Vic.
Good.
Hi,
How are
Steve.
you?
And Anthony.
Hiya, that's Vic that's going to be there. So I'm just going to leave you. Any questions, please leave them in the comments. We'll get through as many as possible as usual. As with all our On the Sofa guests, all the questions will be collated and sent to them. So if we do miss any, please know that we will actually send any comments that you say. All right, then I will leave you to it, Vic.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. And just like many of the defenders who never saw him coming, we can't see Steve White at the moment, but we will hopefully see him on and off throughout the course of the evening. Steve, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know you're not in your regular place at the moment, so we're equally very much more grateful for you to join us tonight at such short notice. How are you, first and foremost?
Yeah, very well, Vic, and great to run into you down at Exeter a couple of weeks ago and covering that game. I've done many match commentaries in the last year or so because of the COVID and one or two other things. But yeah, that was a good game, and okay, it didn't go our way on the night, but we look to have a good chance of the playoffs.
Okay, well, we'll get to Swindon's chances a little later on, but obviously we want to talk about your career and focus mainly on what happened at the county ground for you. Mention of John Gorman, of course, who we've got on this particular program next week. You've got a great deal of affection for John Gorman, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, he did a fantastic job at the football club, as you know, Vic, going back God knows how many years ago, now 93, and all those things that happened, and he came with Glenn, of course, and he was a great foil for Glenn, and obviously as he was playing most games, then John was most often in the dugout, and had quite a big influence on the team and the team performances.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about those Premier years a little later, but let's go right back to the beginning for you. You were born in 1959, which makes you 5 years younger than me, which I'm a little bit annoyed about. But anyway, in Chipping Sodbury, and Mangotsfield United, your first club, but Rovers were your first club in a way, weren't they? How did that all come about? You had you didn't quite get an apprenticeship there, did you?
Yeah, that's right, Vic. Back in the day, then they did academies and scholarships and that now, but it was the apprenticeship scheme then, which was 16 to 18. You did your 5 years at secondary school, and then at that time I was playing for Bristol Rovers nursery team, which was Parkway Juniors and Stockwood Juniors were the Bristol City equivalent. In that league, we played in there in the southwest, and we used to play on Sundays. And I played through with the likes of Kevin Mabbott, Gary Mabbott, Gary Megson, these players. And when I was coming up to be offered a contract at 16, they didn't think I was physically strong enough. They didn't give me an absolute reason. But I scored lots of goals, coming up to being offered an apprenticeship, but didn't quite cut the mustard. They had a lot of lads from South Wales there. Stan Montgomery run a very successful youth setup over there, and lots of the boys that came across the bridge went on to make the professional game. Vaughan Jones, Phil Bater, Peter Aitken. All these names, Frankie Prince, I played with, who was at the end of his career when I did get back into the professional scene. But yeah, so I stayed on at school, and during that time, I built myself up and started doing a lot of body weights, press ups, sit ups, and that sort of thing. And I remember my dad feeding me with eggs and. To try and get me a lot stronger. And at that time, I played for Mansfield under 18s, but also in the second year, between 17 and 18, my second year at sixth form, I played for Rovers junior team as well. So yeah, and then at 18, I was much stronger. I played quite a few reserve games as well for Bristol Rovers, so they still kept an eye on me, of course. The Mansfield manager was Doug Hillard at the time, and he played 600 games for Rovers, a great stalwart right back, and he helped me a great deal. And when they decided in the end that when I got to 18 and a half, they were going to offer me a professional contract. I've been fortunate enough to play for England schoolboys while I'd stayed on at school, and I think that raised my profile a little bit more and gave me an opportunity. But I was banging the goals in then, and so they took me on for a 1-year contract back in, what was that then? Let's think, 1977. £35 a week, Vic.
A lot of money, Steve, in those days. I guess. Tell me about a tennis ball, some concrete bleeds blocks, and a wall. How much does that involved in your build up to playing in the professional game? Because practice makes perfect, and I think you practiced a lot, didn't you?
I did. You've been talking to somebody, Vic, and you've got good information. Perhaps we've had the conversation before. Yeah, I mean, players become a professional footballer, if you like. The difference between, in many aspects, a lad that doesn't quite make it. Sometimes, if he's technically good enough and intelligent enough, and he can run, those are the three ingredients. And sometimes it's about desire, Vic. And my desire, if I had nothing else, I had desire. I wanted it so badly to become a professional footballer. And when I was about 14, my dad built me a breeze block wall, exactly the same size as a goal. Well, I say he built it, we built it together. And I remember between 14 and 18, smacking the ball against the wall. We had a light rigged up outside in the winter months for literally an hour and a half every night of my life. So I was able to kick the ball first time with both feet, close, far out, however you want, side foot, anything. So whilst I wasn't technically the greatest, I could hit a ball with either foot whenever it came into the box, and that helped me immensely. And also when I was a little kid, I remember my neighbour, Mr. Elson, he allowed me to use his double garage, and I remember spending hours and hours in there practicing with the ball against the wall and just loving what I was doing, you know. And it's interesting because I recently read Ricky Hill's book and Glenn Hoddle's book as well, and they did very similar things. They had balls against the wall at Tottenham training ground when he was a kid, and Ricky Hill played again in Cricklewood. He lived in Cricklewood in North London. He played with the ball against the wall for hours on end, and you know, it's just. So it doesn't actually happen by accident. You know, this is the build up to years of practice and being able to handle the football. And then obviously, because I played at centre forward, that stood me in very good. I was never the greatest header of the ball, but it stood me in good stead for being able to finish a what I call a first-time shot. As a centre forward, you're always better to take a first-time shot if you can, and if you're confident enough to hit it with your laces, i.e., fall through the ball, where you can get, rather than side foot, then where you can get more power on the ball. Then that's how I scored my goals.
Well, just to explain, Steve, that we can't see you, not because you don't want to be seen, it's because of the internet connection. So
shall I try it or not?
Yeah, go on, have a quick go with the camera.
We'll
Let's just see
try.
if we can see for a second. He's gone completely now. That wasn't much good, was it? Chris, can you bring him back on again? Just to explain that we're talking to Chris White. We've gone through his early career and the fact that he hadn't been signed on for Rovers. He hadn't been given an apprenticeship. Chris, could we bring Steve back on again? Is he there? Just a few questions that have come in already. If you want to send in the questions to us, that would be great. And then we can put them to him when Steve rejoins us in a moment or two. Just to remember that next Monday, we have John Gorman on the sofa for us. And then this coming Wednesday, we have a special panel. We'll be talking to Rob Angus, Chief Executive of Swindon Town, the General Manager, Matt Waters, and two members of the Trust as well, James Spencer and Alex Pollock. And hopefully we'll be talking to Clem too. Just waiting for Steve to rejoin us. Chris, are you there? Are you with us on the stream? Oh, we completely lost everybody. It's all gone very quiet. A couple of questions coming in already. This from Andy. Best match for Steve at the Town. Selhurst Park against Gillingham must be up there. Sean says, hi, Steve. Who do you regard as your best strike partner in your Town days? And lots of questions about that penalty against Leicester at Wembley, which we shall no doubt get to when Steve rejoins us on the panel. So please keep with us. Technical problems, of course, the internet sometimes brings these to us. But lovely to talk to Steve White, who's not in his normal abode. So that's why we're perhaps getting the problems that we are at the moment. If you want to join us next Monday, we'll be delighted to do that. Don't forget, SAS Travel are looking for more people to go to Harrogate. So if you are looking to go to Harrogate, they'd like to get in touch with you. They're open on a Tuesday night at the County Ground in the Town End. I think Chris is about to rejoin us. Chris, are we trying to get Steve back?
Yes, we are.
You're not? Still not
yeah, he's back with us now. That's
he's back with us.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll leave it as it is, Steve. We won't mess about it.
Yeah, I'm not touching anything. I don't know if it's my end or your end. I presume it's my end.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Right, well, we got to your younger days. And actually, in those younger days, you played with some pretty darn good players, didn't you? Gary Megson, who many people might remember, whose father was Don, of course, and played in the 66 FA Cup final for Sheffield Wednesday. Gary and Kevin Mabbitt as well. So you played with some decent players.
Yeah, Megson, Gary Megson, he was a classic example. His desire to be a pro was something else. And his father signed me. We played in the same team at Frampton Rangers as 13, 14, 15-year-olds. His father signed me when I was 18, and he wouldn't, I admired him because he wouldn't allow his son to play for Bristol Rovers because he felt, a term that has often been used, nepotism. He felt he would be better going to Plymouth Argyle and doing an apprenticeship there, and that's what happened. But he had a great career, and he absolutely overachieved because technically he won't mind me saying he was similar to me. You know, he wasn't absolutely the greatest, but his desire to be a pro was great. And he had many games at first division level. You know, so he did very well indeed. Kevin Mabbitt as well. He was fancied by Man United. He went to Bristol City in the end. And Gary Mabbitt, of course, he played for Rovers the year after. I think 2 years after I went to Luton for 200 grand. He went to Tottenham for 100,000, and had a fantastic 500-600 game career at Tottenham Hotspur. So yeah, they had some great young talent coming through there, and fortunate to play with those players.
How much did that? I'm going to say you were turned down at an early age, but how much did that, having to sort of make your way back into the pro game via non-league, all that kind of thing, how much did that increase your hunger and desire to make it in the pro game?
I think you have to have a little bit of good fortune along the way, don't you? And I was lucky enough not to suffer too many injuries in my career, and just to I think my determination to get in. But even then, Megson gave me my first contract. and he gave me a year to prove myself on next to nothing money. And I remember it was 8 months before I made my first team debut, and that one or two injuries to major players, Paul Randall and Bobby Gould there at the time, Dave Staniforth, and I made my debut at Southampton, and we got beat. I think it was 3-1 on the day. Shilton in goal, and McMenemy the manager. I think it was a year before they won the FA Cup final against Man United. But McMenemy gave me good praise. He said it was a very good debut for a kid, and actually that was one of the best atmospheres I've ever played in. Unbelievable down there at the Dell. They had about 30,000 people there, stamping on the wooden stands, and when the Saints go marching in, unbelievable. I remember it as if it was yesterday, coming down that tunnel where it's on the corner flag it used to be at the Dell, and that crescendo of noise. The stand was right on top. It was unbelievable. I remember the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. It was scary, and that was your debut. But from then on, once you got a taste of that, and then I scored in my second game against I think it was Millwall away. They had to play at Portsmouth because their fans had misbehaved. So I scored a couple of goals in my second game. So that was a little bit of good fortune that I need just to announce that I was here, and then it was just a question of, when you play up front, you're judged by how many goals you score, and that's what I was judged with.
Yeah, well, you've certainly done that throughout your career, haven't you? I mean, I'm going to skip through a lot of the early stuff, because obviously Swindon fans want to know about your time at Swindon. I mean, obviously you got noticed, didn't you, at Bristol Rovers, and then you were taken to Luton, as you said, for 200,000 quid. And you played in a very good side at Luton, did you not? I mean, Swindon legend David Moss was there, the likes of Ricky Hill. This was a pretty good Luton Town side, wasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant team, Vic. It's interesting. I've had about 5 or 6 excellent teams during my time playing. Fortunate enough, some players aren't lucky enough to play at Wembley a couple of times, and I did past the age of 30. Thought I never would, but that Luton Town side was a great side. And the good teams you play in, I can reel the team off now: Findlay, Stevens, Saxby, Donaghy, Goodyear, left back Hazelwood, Brian Horton, holding midfield player, the sitter Makalele, if you want, and Ricky Hill for Chillo each side of him, Moss left wing, myself up front with Brian Steen. So you can just reel that off, because it was one substitute then, Vic, or it's just going into 2, I think, wasn't it? And that was the team, and it was a great side. We won the league. We lost 4 games all season, I think, and 26-12-4, something like that rings a bell. Fortunate enough to score 20 goals alongside Brian Steen, who also got 20, and it was just a great team. And then from then I went to Charlton Athletic. We got promoted, and David Pleat sold me in the summer, which was heartbreaking for me, but it's one of those things in football. He wanted Paul Walsh, and they wouldn't let him go to Luton unless I went the other way. So it happened. Yeah,
and you mentioned Jake Findlay. He had a very brief spell at Swindon, of course, didn't he?
He did.
Lou? Only a very brief, I should say. This is from Paddy. Steve White, great striker, held highly by his ex-Luton boss David Pleat. Scored goals wherever he played during his career. Formed some fantastic partnerships during his time with us. And what about that with David Pleat? I mean, you mentioned that he is part and parcel of football. Football clubs want another player. Sometimes you are the collateral in that. How did you take that? You said you were heartbroken. Did you ever hold that against David Pleat, or did you get on with him after that?
No, not at all, Vic. No, I mean, it's part of football. I was getting married at the time, and what was I, 23, 24, and I was just shocked. I was shocked at the way it came, because I was 2.5 years into a 5-year contract, and looking forward to playing in the first division, and the team was a good team. And he came to me about 3 weeks after the season ended and said, "Steve, a club are interested in signing you. We want a player." And he didn't tell me who the player was, and to come this way, and we can't do the deal unless you're prepared to shift. And of course, for the first week, 2 weeks, I was adamant no, I wasn't going anywhere. But pressure came to bear, and there were financial shall we say, implications that helped make my decision in the end. But you know, it was difficult, and I remember going down to the Ritz. I've never been there before or since in my life to meet Ken Craggs, the Charlton manager, and I never knew that it was an exchange deal with Paul Walsh, and so I get in the lift when we get down there, and coming down was Paul Walsh, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and it was just the two of us. I think he had an agent then, and I had my wife to be with me, and you know, I thought, oh right, there's something else going on here. He knew all about it. I knew nothing about it, and just that he wanted to bring a player in, but I didn't realise it was a part exchange with Walsh from Charlton. But you know, we did the deal, Vic, and I've seen Davis play on many occasions since the 25-year anniversary of our promotion team there, and he often talks about it. In fact, last time I saw him about a year or so ago, he came to our table because he was sitting on the table next, and he sat next to me, and he said to me, Steve, I will always have such a conscience about what I did to you back then. And he was so genuine about it. But you know, he's been in football. He's had lots of up and downs himself. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things. So no hard feelings at all. And you know, he was a great manager, by the way.
You'll remember a certain incident, and lots of questions are coming in regarding a certain penalty, which we'll get to later. I'm sure you would have been aware that was going to be asked. So I've got so many on that, but we'll get to that later on. Now, you did a loan spell at Lincoln, which I don't think, lovely football club, Lincoln City. You know, I've got relations who live in Lincoln. It's a beautiful place. But it wasn't a happy month for you, I don't think, was it?
No, absolutely not. It's what happened was we got to about Christmas, I think. I remember snow was on the ground, and I'd had an injury, and so I was out the side. Charlton were, I don't think they were going bust, but they had a commodities broker chairman there, Mark Hollier. He brought in about 10 or 12 players on big money, Carl Harris, Terry Bullivant, and to try and take the team straight up. And it hadn't happened. We had a few injuries. We fell down the league, and Lenny Lawrence had taken over. Ken Craggs had got the sack and wanted me out to go out on loan to get some games under my belt to his mate Colin Murphy, who managed Lincoln City, or the poet laureate, as I call him. And so I went up there. I agreed to it in the end. A silly thing to do, really. I didn't have to do it, but I did. And I remember going up there, I think that was when they had the young Fashanu there, or Glenn Cockrell as well. They were both out injured, so he needed cover. Gordon Hobson, he was there as well. He was injured. And so I played 2 games, didn't score. We drew away at Rochdale and I think it was Oldham, 2 draws, and he sat me on the bench. So I went to see him after the game. One day. In those days, it was announced a team on a Friday, and I said I came up here to play. I was there for a month, and about 2 weeks in, I said, well, I'm going straight back down the A1, Colin. I said I came here to play. That was the agreement, and so I got in my car and drove straight back down to Luton, and that was that. So that was my experience of bad experience of a loan window.
Yeah, beautiful cathedral there. I'm sure you got familiar with it whilst you were.
I walked around it a few times, mate.
Back to Rovers then, and then a 3-year spell, which ended rather bizarrely, I think, didn't it? Because you were also, because of the financial problems there, you were also selling tickets, I think, weren't you? And weren't you asked to play part-time and sell tickets as well at the same time? And when I mean tickets, I mean scratch cards, things like that.
Yeah. What it was, we didn't have any kids, and I had plenty of time on my hands, and they were losing God knows how much money per week. And they had this helpline society they set up. A great fan of the club, Vernon Stokes. He was one of the directors there, and me and him and a few other great supporters set this helpline society up. I was ringing fans up, asking to come and visit them. And it was easy sell as soon as you went to their house. You know, it was £100 a time. And I sold 200 tickets at £100 a time, by the way. and they give me a free transfer at the end. but the thing was, every experienced player was cleared out. What happened was I was on 300 quid a week. They offered me 150 quid to go into the commercial department, and 150 quid as a player. And I was 27 at the time. I said, I don't think I want to give up my football career yet. Thank you very much, Mr. Rovers. So I will look elsewhere. And that's what I did. And sent letters out to everybody, every football league club, and had not a huge amount of replies, maybe 5 or 6 that were, fairly interested, Swindon being one. And remember going up the motorway and meeting Lou Macari and signing a 2-year contract for Swindon Town in 86, that would have been it.
Yeah, that would have been after the 4th Division campaign, of course, in which they got 102 points. I just wanted to also come back to, the football combination was in operation as well during those times, which was an incredible learning ground, wasn't it, for a lot of young footballers, because we don't have that anymore. But when you think about it, the football combination, some tremendous teams were involved in that, weren't they? Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, all these people. You would come up against really, really top-class players.
Yeah, I can remember that in my early days at Bristol Rovers, we used to go to all those grounds you've just said. I think at one stage it was called the London Football Combination, wasn't it? And then they allowed other teams to join. But like you say, you go to West Ham, play on their first team pitch, Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, and it was just fantastic. And it was keep ball. You couldn't get the ball, and you felt so inferior to these players. These were the creme de la creme. They were first division players. And it was a great learning curve to see just how good, some of these players were and the standard you needed to reach.
Yeah, terrific. So, and actually, as a fan, you used to love going to watch these games, because you'd see top class players playing at the county ground in front of 700 fans if you were lucky. But terrific, you go and see some real top
Precisely.
players.
Yeah. They don't do that now, do they? They have.
No, they don't. No, it's a real shame. Yeah.
They're protected, aren't they? And perhaps that's why some of them have got so much power now. Obviously, the money as well has gone to their heads, isn't it?
Yeah. This is from Andrew. What brought Steve to Swindon? Well, we've kind of covered that a little bit. Remember Town playing Rovers in the Freight Rover Trophy at Eastfield the season before he joined, in which Steve scored. Lou must have been impressed. Well, as we know, Lou Macari did his homework. I think it's fair to say, didn't he? He knew basically the player better than the player did, I think it's fair to say. So he must have watched you a few times before he thought about signing you.
Maybe, Vic. As I said, I remember at the time there was some interest, and I think in the end I rang Swindon. I spoke to John Trollope. He played a big part in it, and he must have put a good word in for me, I presume. And the same day, Lou Macari wanted to meet me in Lee Delamere Services on the M4, and we agreed a 2-year contract just like that. So I no doubt he was meticulous with his planning, and as far as player recruitment is concerned, Vic. And let's be honest, 90% of the job is player recruitment. It really is. And, I think Harry Redknapp once says, if you want to be a good coach, get good players. If you want to be a great coach, get great players. And it's very much true. You can only change players' basic technical ability by maybe 5 or 10%. You can increase their fitness levels, of course. But intelligence as well. Those are the three things that make up a footballer: technique, intelligence, and ability to cover the ground. And you have to have those three. And you just look at the great Liverpool team now, and the pace that they have in that team is absolutely scary. And it's the only way to play. And you can play 2 centre halves, and now he brings this Konate now in, another world class athlete, to play alongside. What's his name? I forgot his name now. Just gone up my head. The Dutch centre half. And,
Van Dijk.
Yeah, Van Dijk. So they can just press the halfway line with 2 players left at the back. If they get counter-attacked, fullbacks push right on. And every time the ball goes in opposition box, there's 5 or 6 players in there. But it's just a fantastic way to play. So you have to be able to run in the top modern game. You have to be. Pure speed is great. If you're speed recovery, then that's an absolute must. And obviously, the more intelligent with your decision making you are, then the better player you're going to be. Technique is a given.
Yeah, we were talking the other day, weren't we, about the Man City team that played at the County Ground in January. And all right, they're great players, but boy, they work hard, don't they? There's a desire there. They want to work hard. They close down. You know, it's that desire that makes them top players, isn't it?
I watched that game, Vic, and we've had the discussion, haven't we, down at Exeter? And absolutely, I mean, I was just absolutely flabbergasted with Bernardo Silva's closing down on the night. Play centre forward, withdrawn centre forward, and like Swindon play 3 at the back. Okay, they play 5 at the back that night. I can understand why, because they want to block it up, and that's the only way possibly to play against them. But very often Bernardo Silva was up against 3 centre halves, but because he dropped deep, he wasn't actually being marked at all. So those 3 centre halves were marking space most of the time, but they were just closing space maybe. But yeah, the work rate and the physicality of those players, and Kyle Walker, the speed of him getting back in, and obviously right across the back line there, just world class players. And to see them live like that is an absolute education, because it reminds you just how good they are.
Absolutely. And, you know, even though we got beat 4-1, it was still a great night because you have that experience. Now, this is from Kevin. How was the training under Lou? Difficult, I expect. Now, the perception is that Lou basically made you run from the counter ground, do a marathon 3 times a day, and then run a bit more. But I'm guessing there was a bit more to it than that, wasn't there?
see, some players would tell you no, and other people would tell you yes. I mean, listen, if you want to, I'll tell you what happens on a weekly basis. I mean, if you play on a Saturday, you had Sunday off. Sometimes players that didn't play on a Saturday would be in Sunday, okay, because and they would train after the game, and then I say train after the game, they would do strides up and down the pitch, whatever combination. Andy Rowland often took it with John Triumph when Lou was there. And then Sunday, very often he'd had certain players in, and he was choosy about who he had in. If he thought somebody had too much liking for alcohol, then they would come in on Sunday. Monday morning, the lads that played on the Saturday would be in training. We'd have 5-a-side. We'd do loosener, leg loosener. We might do a couple of figure 8s around the athletics track, and sometimes we would do 200 or 400 meters around the athletics track. Tuesday was, but we would just play 5-a-sides as well, Vic, obviously, and it was on where John Holloway's the community place is now. Yeah. It was on that. We trained on there a great deal of the time because we didn't have our own training ground, and that was tricky. But we put down cones and that, have a 5-a-side, and Lou would join in. I mean, in those days, managers and coaches often joined in with training. And then Tuesday was, if we didn't have a midweek game, was always going to be a running day. And often we'd put our trainers on and run up Old Town, and then very often have an 11v11 match up there on some pitch up there. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I know it was up Old Town. And then you would have Wednesday off. And then come back in Thursday, and that was more 5-a-side-ish, if we're lucky. Sometimes after a game on a Wednesday, if we'd had a bad one, he would have us in. If we'd had a bad result or something had gone wrong, or some player had upset him or whatever, he'd have us in. But basically, all I can say about Lou Macari is he's one of the most professional men I've ever seen, and his reading of a player's personality, and his getting inside the player was as good as any manager I've played under. And he found out what made a player tick. Phil King, he loved him. He was great pro. Phil was. He loved, and great for the dressing room. But he was always fighting with his fitness level. And technically brilliant, pure speed, fantastic. That's why Sheffield Wednesday paid so much money for him. Yeah. And then he had a move to Villa under Atkinson there, but Louis would have Kingy ride into his house on a push bike after training on an evening to do some keep ups or a little bit of football with Lou at his house. That happened on a regular basis. So he was just very professional, and I think players that have ever dissed Lou in any way, shape, or form, I bet you 90% of the players he brought into that football club have moved on to better things, he made a better player of them, and would look back, myself included, and say he did a great deal for my football career, and he showed us, exactly what it was about. And I've heard stories like he regularly had to look after his weight at training. Peter Coyne used to tell us that he'd regularly go for a run with a sweat bag on after he'd done training in the afternoon. So when any ex-pro kids himself, it's not about being able to cover the ground. If that is not one of the most important things, then they're kidding themselves. But yeah, he was a great manager.
Yeah, obviously there are two or three things that people want to know about, and two of them one of them you obviously know, and then there's another one about a goal that you scored at county ground for another club, which we'll maybe ask you about. But this is from Andy. Best match for you at the town. Selhurst Park versus Gillingham must be up there. Now, that was a warm, balmy night in southeast London, and I was lucky enough to be doing the commentary. Jimmy Quinn was helping me. There was a mass of Swindon Town fans there, and one S. White scores within 2 minutes. What a start to that game.
Yeah, that was one of those games, Vic, where it's etched on the memory forever. And as the fan quite rightly said, it's probably one of my best memories, being a goal scorer of Swindon Town and the success we had there. I didn't have a brilliant game that night, but I was in the right place at the right time and got us off to a great start. Forward ball from Kingy. I think Charlie Henry headed it on, didn't he? And I was in behind Les Berry, or ex-teammate at Charlton Athletic. And a right foot finish, wasn't it, into the bottom corner past Phil Kite. But that was it. That was just a great night. We had about 10,000 of our fans all down that one side, and Palace has always had a great support there. I mean, that game went to the third game. Obviously, John Corman was assistant manager, I think, at Gillingham at the time. And I remember when I first met Johnny, just looked at me and shook his head when he came with Glenn and Chalky, and I always referred to that night. But yeah, it was just that it was to be, wasn't it? We were 2-0 down in the second leg at the county ground. Yeah. Coyne and Henry got such important goals, and it took it to the third game, and that was probably one of my best nights in football, going along with the Wembley victories, of course. And then the second goal, I happened to score at the right time. I think it was a long ball forward. Bamber headed it on, and I inside left run and finished with my left foot, just inside the box. But yeah, great evening. It really was super for me, because I've been given a free by Ravers, and then those two goals took me to the top scorer on 21 for the club that year. We had Quinny on. I think he had 17, 18, 20 as well, and Dave Bamber scored a lot of goals. So we had goals from all over the place. It was a good team, and all athletes, that, or people that had power and strength, like Tim Parkin and Calderwood. But yeah, we ran over the top of a lot of teams. Myself, Quinny, and Bamber up front, of course, and of course Chris Kamara did a fantastic job in midfield. He was a most underrated player, Chris, and he's another. He looked after his fitness so well. He understood. He really understood. And what I liked about Chris was he'd always put his foot in and win the headers, and his motivation was super. A very, very underrated player.
Yeah, very much so. And we wish him well, of course, because he's recently spoken of an illness that he has. So we obviously wish Cammy all the very best. Yeah,
absolutely. I echo those thoughts, Vic. I saw him the other day on Breakfast TV, and I think I spoke to you about it. And let's hope he goes on well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now then, Lou moves on to West Ham. And then, all right, we have a Scottish international as manager who's played for Celtic, for Manchester United. And then an unexpected appointment. I turn up at the county ground one day, and there is one O.R. Diles, one of the greatest midfielders you'll ever watch play. I watched him play in the 78 World Cup on a grainy black and white TV. Wonderful, wonderful footballer. The next minute, he's manager of Swindon Town after being a legend at Tottenham. What were your thoughts when that happened?
How did we do that, Vic? It's quite unbelievable. I mean, Sir Seton Wills, who was the owner at the time of the football club, they had a policy of always appointing international managers. Macari was international. Ardiles, Hoddle, and it went on for quite a while actually after that, I think. So how they managed to prize him away. Had he been at Tottenham and got the sack from Tottenham, or was he in limbo? I can't quite remember.
I think he'd come to the end of his football career because he was later to manage Tottenham after he'd been at Newcastle.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Of course, absolutely right. Yeah, that was his first job. Yeah, sorry. Just my memory just let me down there. So he came in, and we too couldn't believe because he'd gone to Blackburn. That's right, at the end of his career at Tottenham, he'd gone to Blackburn for a season, I think, didn't he? So I mean, it was just completely different, and to have a World Cup winner managing you, I mean, and we would have done anything for him. It was complete contrast to Louis. He didn't, and it just shows you there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's unbelievable that all we did in training was circle ball, five-a-sides, very seldom do anywhere. Chick Bates was assistant manager there, or what else I say, he kept his job as coach, and he used to say to Ozzy, I think we need to give their legs a stretch on the odd occasion, But I mean, that was another great side, Vic. You can go through that team again. That was a route.
I think the point is, actually, he played for Blackburn at Swindon in a league match because I interviewed him afterwards, bizarrely enough. Anyway, what I was going to say is a lot of those players were loose signings, weren't they? And Duncan Shearer was a loose signing, so you were kind of all loose signings that Ozzy sort of took over, changed the style, but they were still those players, weren't they?
Yeah, I think there's only one player that was Ozzy signing. That was Dave Kerslake. If you go through the team, Digby, Bowden, Calderwood, Gittins, Summer. That was before Summer's time, obviously, and then we had McLaren, Tom Jones, Steve Foley, all Macari signings. Alan McLaughlin, Macari, myself, and Shearer. So Kerslake was the only one. But that was the next year, you see, and that just shows you when I say recruitment's everything. It's all about players at the end of the day. And obviously, if you've got a manager you want to play for, then that helps a little bit. He was a lovely man, Ozzy, lovely man, lawyer, a very intelligent chap. Lawyer by trade, by profession, before he became a footballer, I understand. And we would have done anything for him, and he just galvanised the dressing room in that fashion. Nobody had a bad word about him, and he was just such a nice man, and no arrogance whatsoever. World Cup winner, Argentinian, and it was soon after the Falklands War, obviously.
Yeah.
And he had no edge to him whatsoever, and we all loved him, and we'd all die for him. So in a different way, technical way, we had a great. The clever thing he did though was he put McLaughlin at the head of the diamond. He played diamond midfield. He understood that Gittins had major pace. John Gittins, bless him, no longer with us, of course. Yeah. And Calderwood we could then play with our fullbacks, Bowden and Kerslake pushed on, who technically were outstanding. And Tom Jones was a very, very good player, very underrated, and as was Foley, left and right side. McLaren sat there holding the fort, and myself and Shearer up front. But then in that team, the goals between us, myself and Shearer, 27 each. And I think McLaughlin, 27 each, mind, that season, not blowing my own trumpet, but just saying what it takes to win a league or to be, and we were only in the playoffs, so we didn't win the league without output. And I'm sure McLaughlin got 17 goals that season. So massive output. So that was his, and obviously he got the winner on the day. Myself and Shearer could have had 4 or 5 between us. That will always haunt me. That I didn't manage to bag a goal at Wembley, but we should have beaten them 5-0. We absolutely throttled them, didn't we? And ran them ragged.
I remember doing the game at Newcastle towards the end of the season. I think you've got 50-odd goals between you and Duncan, and there were 50-odd goals between the strike partnership of Newcastle. And I said before the game, there's no way this is going 0-0. And guess what? It ended 0-0, didn't
it? As it is.
Yeah. Right, a couple of questions right there. this is from Sean. Hi, Sean. Who do you regard as your best strike partner on your town days? Well, I'm guessing Duncan's up there, isn't he?
Yeah, Duncan. You'd have to say Duncan, because what is a centre forward? What is a job description of a centre forward? And many forget to understand that. It is putting the ball in the back of the net. Duncan was one of the best, if not the best, striker of ball with his right foot I've ever seen. He could head the ball well. He couldn't. He's got 2 plastic hips now, by the way. Last time I saw him at the last meeting, he couldn't run, but I did his running for him. But he could score. He could score any kind of goal for anywhere, and he had that sixth sense of where to be on the in the box, where the cross was coming from. And of course, we had great service from the wing back positions. Well, they weren't wing backs, but they're basically wingers, weren't they? Kerslake and Bowden. But so yeah, it was Shearer was a great striker. Other people that I've played with, just trying to scratch my head. Brian Steen was a good striker at Luton, of course. Technically very good. He managed to get an England cap. And David Moss, one of the best passers of the ball for a centre forward, because he always played the ball in first time, right or left foot. He didn't mess about, and his delivery was magnificent. Very underrated player, David Moss.
Yeah,
not a centre forward, but left winger. Derek Hales, I played with him at Charlton. He was a great goal scorer, and hard as nails. I'm just trying to think who else. Dave Mitchell was, his work rate was his way of giving to the team. He had outstanding. I wouldn't say finishing was his best attribute, but he had outstanding pace and could hurt behind. I'm very honest boy. So yeah, fortunate to play with some very good strikers.
Yeah, very good indeed. Well, you're not bad yourself, Steve. I think it's fair to say.
I tried hard, Vic.
You did. You're fantastic. And I've had this discussion with many people. I don't think I've ever come across a better free transfer player ever, quite frankly. So I think, I'm going to, throw that.
That's so kind of you, Vic.
Well, hey,
what do you get for peanuts nowadays? Not much.
Right. Now, Aussie moves on, obviously, to Newcastle, and the Samba football disappears. And you get rid of a World Cup winner. Well, not get rid of him, but he leaves. And what a lovely man. I've got to say, in all my dealings with him, this is Osvaldo Ardiles, for goodness sake, but a lovely chap to talk to. And then in comes Mr. G. Hoddle, who's also, wow, it's Glenn Hoddle. Hello.
How did we do it? How did we get these people to the county ground?
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is.
So what was your first thing? I mean, I always remember Roger Malone, dear old Roger. You'll remember a famous day at Bristol City, I think, as well, won't you, Steve, when a certain chant was going in the background while you were being interviewed by Roger Malone some years ago.
Yeah, which we can't say on air.
Yeah, which we can't. We'll move on swiftly. Anyway, yeah, Roger sort of interviewed him for ages, so we had to wait until after training or after he'd met the players. So you meet Glenn Hoddle. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Glenn was different again. He had that aura about him. He was. I have to say, technically, he's the best player I've ever played with. Ricky Hill was right up there with him. I have to say that, and Ricky Hill could do things Glenn couldn't do, and Glenn could probably do things he couldn't do. But technically, his range of passing, his touch, his awareness, his technique was absolutely outstanding, Vic. And having read his book since, you can see how hard he worked his technique when he was a kid. He used to try and juggle the ball 2 miles from his school to home every night at one stage, and berated himself and in the end he managed to do it. So he worked so hard, but technically he was outstanding. He could flick the ball over his head, catch it on the other foot, and he could make the ball tall. And his range of passing, you saw that at Wembley with the 60-yard pass he made to me for the 4th goal. And he finished so well that day as well. His ability in training, I mean, he could put the ball in the back of the net wherever he wanted it, bend it in the top corner, bottom corner, like you've never seen. So an outstanding footballer. Should have played over 100 times for England. For whatever reason, he didn't. But yeah, I mean, just to attract him as well, he had an aura about him, and he was nobody's fool, and whereas it was a little bit more relaxed with Ozzy than with Glenn, there wouldn't be any messing about. He had to eat the right things, and he frowned on people if they didn't behave in the proper manner, and so he was very much in charge, and because of that, he managed to put together a successful team. And the success followed at Wembley in the second year.
Yeah, and also he learned a lot under Arsene Wenger, of course, at Monaco, hadn't he? And in terms of diet, because the British way, wasn't the best in terms of diet, was it? Let's be honest. But Arsene Wenger, people like that, they revolutionised the way people thought about fueling for football, didn't they?
Did you say fueling?
Fueling for football. Yeah,
yeah, that was a problem, wasn't it? Fueling.
Yeah.
I mean, when you read some of the stories about Liverpool players in Suna's book, I've read his book recently as well, and and the amounts of alcohol that were consumed, Tony Adams and these people, and it was like you had to be a drinker at some of these top clubs to, and the stories that Lou Macari had of Brian Robson and Whiteside and these people. He said he's the only man I can see out at 4 o'clock in the morning, Brian Robson, and be in the front in training the next day. He was just an unbelievable athlete. But yeah, it was consumption was something else. Then alcohol was something you did on a regular basis in my younger years as a player. But yeah, I mean he certainly learned from Wenger and and about diet, and he was very, very strict on that. And then I think we started having pasta under Glenn after refueling, as he called it, after training. Your body needed it, fair enough. And he was down to the finite details with his planning. There's no question about that. And when you hear people like Rio Ferdinand and speak so highly of him as the England manager, and these are the top players, mind Vic, what I'm saying is correct. So he really, I felt sorry for him with the England scenario, the way that panned out. It really was sad, and his success rate as England manager, I believe, was 60%. He's in the top 3, I think, of all England managers still today. So it was a shame that was curtailed, too soon, and obviously he's had a major heart attack to deal with over the last couple of years ago, and that was a shock to all of us. Of course, I've seen him since, but yeah. So yeah, he certainly was. He certainly brought something else to Swindon, no doubt.
Yeah, he's another great man to deal with. And of course, one thing we didn't mention, which we should have done after 1990, was the demotion. I mean, it's often said that that team would have not thrived in Division 1, but it would have stayed in Division 1, which would have been the Premier League in those days. I mean, just briefly, because, the time is running out, but I mean, just briefly, what were your first thoughts when I was at Villa Park that day. I was stood behind the Secretary of the Football League when he read that judgment out, and my stomach fell through the floor. How did you feel as a footballer?
Devastated, mate. We were absolutely devastated. I remember we were down in Cornwall on the end of season trip with Ozzy, and when it was announced, and we came back early. And Calderwood was seized, and they took him to arrested and took him to some holding jail in Bristol, I think, or something. And it was unbelievable. 7 a.m. they raided us in the hotel there, and so off we get on the coach and come back. But yeah, absolutely devastating, Vic. I think that team, 2 years younger, a lot of them broke away then, of course. May well have done better in the first division. Well, it's first division now because Premier League never started in '93, of course. We'll never know. But certainly with the addition of a couple of players, I mean, there's every likelihood that we could have done very well, and it may well have been that. I think it's possible that Ozzy may have stayed longer if it hadn't turned out as it did in the second year when things went badly wrong, didn't they? And we only just staved off relegation from the championship that in that second year.
Yeah. Although you won the opening game of the season, the following season, which was an extraordinary result. I think one of your old clubs, Charlton, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
Yeah, an extraordinary result. Right, we've got more questions coming in. We're going to get to that moment in a minute because you know what moment I'm talking about. So, you've been asked this thousands of times. So, Digby or Hammond would love a striker's view on our top two goalkeepers at the time. That's from Hannah's. Hi, Hannah's.
Would love a striker's view on
Both
who was
those
the better keeper.
Yeah, or how good were they as goalkeepers?
Yeah, that'd be unfair of me to
I get that.
But having said that, I mean, Nicky came into his own when Glenn came out. Fraser was out injured for some time, and he technically with his feet he was very good indeed. Nicky Hammond, very good indeed, and he had an advantage over Fraser there. But obviously, with Fraser's stature, 6'3", he high balls in the air. He was a very good goalkeeper, and I think he got Player of the Year on more than one occasion, maybe two or three, whilst he was at Swindon Town, and he had a great career there and was an excellent keeper, no question about that. But Nicky went on then did he go off to Reading, I think, or if I remember rightly, in the later years. But yeah, I certainly he was certainly a good. A lot of times he was standing for Fraser, and in the end, you want to go and prove yourself and be the number one somewhere else, don't you?
Yeah, you had a brief spell at Plymouth, and you might remember you scored a goal for Hereford against Plymouth after Nicky he was in goal for Argyle that night. I don't know if you remember that one, but
home or away?
It was at Home Park because I was there doing the game, and yes, an interesting moment.
Trying to remember it. I remember scoring 3 against Plymouth later in the year when we beat them 3-0 at Edgar Street to get into the playoffs. But I can't remember Nicky being in goal that day.
And also, I should say, of course, Peter Shilton almost signed you for Argyle, did he not? Because it was when they were struggling against relegation, and I remember saying to him, you would have kept them up. But for some reason, it never happened. So,
Vic, we won't go into that one. I could do, but
okay.
I could be there in 10 minutes. He promised me a lot of money, and the chairman said, got on the phone to me. He said, "What does he promise?" He promised it. I'll tell you now. When you're 60, he was going to give me 80 grand signing on thing. And the chairman said, "That is not happening, Mr. White." I had the negotiations with Shilton on the phone for a 2-year contract. This was, and I was almost ready to go down there because I could have commuted, no doubt. That wouldn't have been a problem and stay down there a couple of weeks during the midweeks. But yeah, and Shilton had obviously he'd done his dough, didn't he, Shilton, as a player, unfortunately, and yeah.
Interesting times.
That was funny.
Now then, right. Let's get on to that penalty then, because you've been asked it a million times, right? So let me tell you some of the comments that I've got. Here we go. And there's lots of them. Andy says, would VAR have given that penalty against Leicester, or was it a drive? Kevin says, did you dive for the penalty against Leicester? Be honest. And lots more on that vein. Now, oh yes, David says, can I ask, was it a penalty at Wembley against Leicester? David Ellery, best ref ever. And it goes on and on and on. Now, we should say, of course, Swindon are cruising 3-0 up. I think you said before, didn't somebody say, John Moncur say, we've talked to him about it on this programme, actually, John Moncur, and he said about the cigar, it's time to light the cigars, fellas, or something. Then a bonkers 15 minutes. Now, I'm behind that goal where Leicester is scoring those goals, and it's bedlam, right? Bedlam. And you're on the bench whilst all this is carrying on, I think.
Yeah.
And then on you come, and then there's that moment. Take us through that penalty, Steve.
Do you know what? I'd like a quid for every time it's been asked the question, Vic. But yeah, I mean, and I always give the same answer. It's twofold, really. If you look at the goal that Sean Taylor scored, I think he scored the third goal, a header after half time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And if you look at the keeper, Poole, he came out and he turned the other way, and there's a great shot. He's got his eyes closed as Sean is he's got his head down at boot level to get the header to score the goal. And exactly the same thing happened with the penalty. Hoddle made a great pass forward. I was onto it, diagonal run, inside to out, into the outside of the box there. And Paul came late. I got to the ball before him, headed it on, and with his left or right arm, it must have been his right arm, I think, it was flailing, and it made contact with me, and it was enough contact because I was never the sort of player to be able to. And I'll tell you why. Because most clubs I was at, I didn't take penalties because I was a good striker of the ball. I was never the best striker of the ball, and the reason is why. If I could score a goal myself, rather than go down for a penalty, then it's a goal for me and not for the penalty taker. So I always say the same thing, and it's true. And I if I could have stayed on my feet, I would have done. But and the other thing is the reason why, because if you're going around the goalkeeper and the ball had gone a little bit wide, but you've always got the opportunity to score the goal yourself once you've gone around the keeper. It had gone a little bit wide after he touched me, but there's no question, and I can categorically tell you 100%. There's no question that I dived. I did not dive. And some referees may not have given it because it looked minimal contact, but the fact was he came out, and I don't like to use the term bottled it, but he should have either cleaned me right out or took the ball, but he didn't take the ball. I took the ball first with the head, and I think that's what the referee saw, the fact that I'd taken the ball first with the head, and was past him, and that's why he gave it.
Well, Malcolm says VAR would have given that today. Felt contact is okay to go down. I've got all right. I'll ask you this then. The skylight on the bus is open, and Steve White is standing up through that skylight and making a certain motion. Do you remember doing that?
I don't know how much alcohol I've had after the game, Vic. But if you tell me what sort of motion it was, what?
Well, they're kind of like that motion, if you see what I mean.
Oh, right, yeah. Obviously, sorry. I mean, there was lots went on that day back in the car park through the skylight. I can tell you. We won't go there.
No.
But I can remember doing that. Yeah. Obviously, I was just winding fans up.
Yeah.
Our fans.
Okay. Yeah, it was a wonderful moment anyway, that fantastic, magnificent game and I defy anybody. But I mean, Charlton's playoff final against Sunderland, was it, a few years later? That was an absolute belter as well. But, that day is one of the best football matches you'll ever see, isn't it? I mean, it's an incredible game of football.
It was. Do you know what? I've only seen it back about a couple of times since 30 years later. But it was something to behold. And for me as a player and the other lads that had long careers and were fortunate to play at Wembley on two occasions there and win both games. It was just the icing on the cake for my career.
Yeah. This is from Craig. What are his memories of the first few weeks in the Premier League, and how much did Fjortoft's inability to score affect him and the other strikers? Now, you had an injury, I think, the following season, didn't you? And that kept you out for a while. And do you think Jan Åge Fjortoft's, I mean, he was magic after Christmas, but before Christmas just couldn't buy a goal, could he, basically? Had he got goals, do you think you'd have stayed up?
May have been different, Vic. Who knows? I mean, we brought him in, and Scotty, he came in, didn't he? Centre forward. My legs were almost gone then, Vic, although I did go to Hereford after and were rejuvenated, but obviously that was 2 leagues lower. But yeah, I mean, he had to bring in centre forwards. I was at the end of my career. I had a back injury in the first half of the previous season, and I was recovering from. But yeah, Fjortoft, he was a funny player. He could do things. One game he would be anonymous, and another game he would do things that you just didn't know he had in his locker. So you could see how he was scouted and how they brought him to the football club in the first place, and later went on to a 1.3 million move to Middlesbrough, doesn't he? But I mean, he scored a stack full of goals in the second half of that season. But I think, if the truth be told, we brought in 2 or 3 players that were at the end of their careers, and we're not going to be able to contribute to Swindon Town Football Club, that were just coming there just to get another year's contract or whatever. And those that didn't help. I think we could have recruited better. Whether we had the wherewithal to do it, I don't ask me. I wouldn't like to say. But yeah, were we good enough to stay up? I don't think the team was good enough, Vic. I have to be honest. And it may have been different if we would have been able to get 2 or 3 younger, more experienced players in. But we seem to only be able to I mean, Kilcoyne came there and he was a great centre half at his time at Coventry. But, at the back end of the career, Tony Galvin as well. And I think younger blood would have helped us more.
Yeah, fair enough. Andrew says Jimmy Greaves used to say the best game he ever saw at Wembley, that playoff final, which, high praise indeed from such a wonderful goal scorer. The other moment I'm going to ask you about then is the other moment that that I'm going to ask you about. I mean, I was there that Tuesday night in the Freight Rover or whatever it was called in those days. Steve McMahon was manager of Swindon. You'd moved on to Hereford. You brought the house down by scoring a goal against Swindon for Hereford. I mean, nobody likes to see goals scored against their team, but I think that gives you a sign of the affection that you were held by Swindon Town fans. And all right, it's a strange old thing that we're cheering somebody who scored against our team, but it was Steve White, for goodness sake. That was a wonderful moment for you, was it?
Absolutely, Vic. It was. As a goal scorer, yeah, you're dead right. I cried twice when I was at Swindon Town. I wept twice there. And one was a day I went out of the county ground and left and said my goodbyes to John Gorman. And it was the right time. It was the right time. But the end of 8 great years. And the other was a tear in my eye after that ovation they gave me then. And that meant everything to me. I mean, often players nowadays don't sort of celebrate when they score against their old club, but I don't think that was in vogue then, was it?
No.
So I still celebrated, but it was a lovely accolade that the supporters gave to a player who scored an ex-player who scored a goal against their team, and that was quite unbelievable.
I mean, your relationship with this is from Malcolm. This is about Wembley. I even threw him a beer onto the coach skylight at the county ground. I only had 4 because only 17, but I couldn't refuse Chalky a beer after what he did at Wembley. And doesn't that kind of sum up your relationship with Town fans? You Swindon fans, you're forever linked, even though you were a Rovers player, for goodness sake. Which is a very rare accolade, I think, that you are still loved by Swindon fans.
Yeah, I had a great relationship with them. I think they remembered the first season I was there, and that night at Crystal Palace that we've already covered, and that cemented my relationship from the word go. Having come there on a free transfer, and I think any football fans, if they know anything about the game, they always relate and admire a player that always gives his all, even though sometimes he might not have a good game. But it shows that desire and that winning spirit to go through whatever you have to on the football pitch to get the result for your team. And I've always had that attitude, and I was so grateful for the support I got from the supporters. And the other thing is, Vic, often went into the bar afterwards and mixed with the supporters. Some players don't do that, don't want to do that. I don't know. Some players do, and I always found it engaging, and just to talk to players about the game, or ask, they'd ask you questions of, what about this, Chalky? Was that a foul? Did you go down? Was that a penalty? All the discussions we've just had.
Yeah.
And I just loved that interaction with the supporters. And they know then that it's not an act that I'm chatting to them. They know that I'm genuinely interested in what they've got to say and their viewpoint on the game and how they saw things pan out on the football pitch. And that's why I always say supporters are the most important people in any football club. And God, haven't that come home to roost during the last 2 years during the pandemic? And I think people have realised that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing we haven't touched on, of course, is your managerial career. Maybe you'll come on again at some point in the future and we'll talk about that, because you had time at Chippenham, of course, which was okay, wasn't it? And then you've also, you've been at Southampton Academy, coached the likes of Gareth Bale, for goodness sake, who back in the news last week for that incredible free kick.
Unbelievable.
Tyrone Mings as well, who played for Chippenham for a brief. Was that under you? Or was that
not under me? Not under me,
no.
Vic. No, his dad played under me.
Yeah. I think his dad managed.
Yeah, Tyrone was at the Southampton Academy when I was there, and they didn't give him a contract. We said they should have given him a contract because we were running the Bath side of things, and they didn't give him a contract. So he went to Millfield School and 2 years there. He was another one that was a late developer, but world-class athlete, fantastic athlete, and look how well he's done for himself now.
Absolutely.
And Bale, of course, as well.
Yeah. Well, what is there to say about Gareth Bale? Yeah, incredible footballer. Yeah. There's so much we could cover, but we could be here all night, quite frankly. And so, at some point in the future, would you come back on again?
Absolutely, Vic. Anytime I can do anything to help your good selves and the supporters of the football club, I will do.
I tell you what, it's always a joy to see you, Steve, because you always say hello, and it's just a joy to see somebody like you who just never forgets. And I really appreciate that. So I thank you very much.
That's so kind words, Vic. I thank you greatly, and you, Chris, and Anthony as well. I've not got him up on my screen at the moment. No. You still can't see me, but you can hear me. Great to talk.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Steve. That was good. Brilliant. We are getting into live events now, so maybe we could do a live event. Get you and a couple of teammates.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll see if I get a better connection. I'll be back home next time, and we better see each other.
Yeah, well, we'll go down the Legends Lounge and we'll do a live evening with you. How about that? With you and
no problem. If you wanted anything like that, you've only got to say the word, and I'll be up for it.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you ever so much. Yeah, and it's been fantastic. What I usually do on these, Steve, is I'll collate all the comments that have come in from the fans, and I'll send them to you by email, just so you can see any comments that weren't sort of able to be brought through, because there was loads.
Wonderful. That'd be nice. I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
No problem at all.
We've got a bit of housekeeping to do, Steve, so we'll let you go now. But
okay, great. Great to talk. Okay.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so that's good. So, right, as we said, this Wednesday coming, we have got the Trust and the club on, just for a catch-up, because we haven't had one for a while with them. And also, of course, we'll talk about the ground and anything else you want to bring up. Matt Walters is joining us, who's a general manager, who hasn't been on one of these before, so it'd be nice to introduce him. And then next Monday, we've got John Gorman. So he will be here. I've got to catch up with him this week. He's been off visiting his son abroad, so I said I'd catch up with him when he was back. So that's next Monday. And Vic and I will see any of you that are travelling to Rochdale on Saturday.
We will. And I should also say, one of our regular panel members, Matt Hayward, is on the Sir Tom Broadbent Lounge this coming Wednesday evening at 9. We're on at 7. And then there's more football content for you from Swindon Town at 9 with Matt Hayward, of course, who's a regular member of our Monday night panel. So Hannah's will be asking him all sorts of questions on that evening. So there we are. That's how your week maps out. Don't have anything else to do. You're not doing anything else this week. Except...
No, and we try not to clash with any of the other podcasts, because we never want to do that. The more the merrier. So we try not to clash with them. So we will be on, as our usual, 7 till 8 on Wednesday. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you next week. Oh no, Wednesday. Sorry.
Wednesday.
Bye-bye. Wednesday. Bye-bye.